If your paycheck disappears faster than a family-sized bag of Cheddar Blast goldfish, if you make good money but you're still transferring cash mid-month to cover shortfalls, then you need a budget. In this video, I'll show you 3 simple budget tips that take you from we should be fine to we're actually in control. And in my second budget tip, I'll show you the most consequential budget line people forget. Hi, I'm Justin, a certified financial planner, former product manager, and Oxford grad. I help busy, ambitious parents build a simple system for their money so it supports the life they're trying to build. It doesn't matter how much money you make. I work with couples making $500K, and we're all just so damn busy. Busy working, busy raising a family, and then all these bills appear fast and furious.
Smoke.
Maybe you can relate. It's just really hard to stay on top of it all. So where do you start? I'm using a 1-page Excel budget in this video. If you want my exact template, grab it in the companion blog post linked below. Let's take a look at our 1-page budget template. I did this in Excel, but this is going to look very similar in different budgeting apps as well. So we're going to start with income up top. We're going to dive into that a little bit more in a second. And then below that, we have our total expenses, which are made up of these 3 different categories. And then what we're netting each month in terms of leftover money. Your main problem is that you don't know if this month is going to be feast or famine. This is how we're going to address this. We need to calculate your net after-tax income from all sources. In my example, we'll say that spouse 1 clears $7,500 in monthly W-2 income from the primary job, and spouse 2 brings home $8,000 in income, as well as $1,000 in 1099 income from consultant work, and $500 in dividend income from a taxable brokerage account, for a total monthly net income of $17K. These are going to be your main categories of income. Anything in blue is a hard-coded number. You could see in the formula box here, we have the $150K divided by 26 pay periods times 2 pay periods per month times 0.65, which is the take home after the withholdings. And I did that for spouse 2 as well. Then we have some people get 1099 income. That's when you're an independent contractor. You might be doing some drop shipping on the side, selling things on eBay. You might offer outside consulting services. And then whoever your payment provider is going to send you a 1099 at the end of the tax year, which you need to account for. And then of course we have dividend income. So this would be if you have some kind of brokerage account. That's going to be different from trading, like capital gains, which I have down here as stock trading. If you had money like in a high yield savings account or a CD from your bank, that would go here. That's issued as a 1099 INT. In this case, both spouses receive 26 paychecks, both contribute 4% pre-tax to their 401k, and neither of their jobs are eligible for a bonus. I figured 65% take-home pay after accounting for taxes, healthcare, and funding retirement. You can get these numbers by going through your banking app and summing up all your regular monthly inflows, and if necessary, you can take an average of the last 3 months if your pay dates or the pay amounts are more irregular. Now you have your income number, but how do you know if you're netting enough? We need to figure out your monthly expenses by sorting them into 3 buckets: fixed, variable, and non-monthly expenses. Your top 5 fixed expenses stay the same amount each month. They might include your mortgage, student loan, credit card minimum payments, car payments, and insurance. I've baked in some values for these categories and others in my budget file. The next thing I want to look into is the fixed expenses. So I have a total of 47 budget lines across all 3 expense categories. Here I put in some placeholder values for a mortgage or rent. I included property tax payments, which in this case is a shade under 14K divided by 12 months. So I did lump in the mortgage payment, which includes principal and interest, along with the property tax. It could be that you have one value for spouse 1, one value for spouse 2, and you can accommodate that just by writing in either one of these cells. Column G, I classify it as a need or a want. I'm totally okay with you changing these, but I gave it a default value based on what I thought made sense for most people. In my example, this couple has $76.50 in fixed monthly expenses. For variable expenses, which vary a little each month, but usually fall within a predictable range, I have a total of $32.50, which is weighted heavily toward food like groceries, restaurant and takeout, but also shopping, entertainment, and gas. We have groceries and restaurant and takeout being the two largest categories. These numbers could definitely be higher. I've sometimes seen these numbers twice as high. The other thing I like to look at is usually the split between basically how much are you cooking at home versus how much are you doing takeout. Depending on your lifestyle, your jobs, and your income, and if you could support it, these ratios could be a little bit more out of whack. We also have a shopping category here, so this would include things like Amazon, Target. I understand though, sometimes you might get groceries and do shopping on Amazon. So there are some subtle nuances. Here, the $200 for medical might include things like co-pays, prescriptions, entertainment and recreation. This is where I put a lot of streaming services. So this is going to be your Disney, your Netflix, your Hulu, your Amazon, your HBO. For pets, this amount could include food, of course, that you buy for your pets, but it could also include the groomers. And then sometimes with the vet, you might pay a monthly amount. By the way, I would love to hear what your biggest monthly expense is, so drop it in the comments below and I'll reply with a tip on how to save money. Finally, we need to put some values in for non-monthly expenses. Those are the one-offs that you incur during the year. They're also called sinking funds. In our case, we have $1,800 in these expenses per month, which includes auto repairs, vacations, taxes, home improvements, and gifts. You might budget more or less than I did. For example, there's a big price difference in taking an Easter break trip to the Kalahari Water Park in Pennsylvania versus the Kalahari Game Reserve in Botswana. Here we have things like auto repairs. It might be that you take your car in once a year to get inspected and you need to replace the tires. That can get pretty expensive pretty fast. For travel and vacation, this is going to be very specific to you. This might be $1,200 for a 2-night trip to Kalahari Water Park. It might be $1,200 for a school trip. $4,500 might be a week and a half road trip. While we might not be spending down these non-monthly expenses every month, it's important that we fund an account for it so that we're ready when that day of reckoning comes and we make that final Mediterranean cruise payment. In fact, I recommend that you have at least 3 bank accounts. 3! Including 2 high-yield savings accounts, one for your 20% that you're trying to save, and one for 10% for that sinking fund, and then a checking account for your remaining 70% of fixed and variable expenses. In our example, our couple has $12,700 in total monthly expenses across all 3 expense categories. So that's it. We've got $4,300 left over, right? Not completely. What are we missing? Real quick, let me know in the comments if you'd like me to show you how to budget using a budgeting app and which one. Okay, I want you to consider 3 things when evaluating your one-page budget and which metrics you should use to measure success. First, did you capture all the expenses? Because maybe you're inflating your baseline. The biggest category people miss is not budgeting for 10% of their total monthly expenses to the miscellaneous category under variable expenses to create a cash buffer. If your total monthly expenses are $10K, then this just ate up $1K of that $4K surplus. Be mindful of other expenses you may have missed by looking for expenses across the year and not just over 1 month. Second, how healthy is your mix of fixed, variable, and non-monthly expenses? I want to show you here that I have fixed expenses as a target of 50% of your overall after-tax income. And in this case, when we sum up all of the values and divide it by the total fixed expenses, we get 45%. So it's green because we're under what our target is. If two different people spend 80% of their net income on total expenses, but one of them has 75% in fixed expenses, while the other has 50%, then are they both really in the same position financially? I think that the person on the hook for a greater amount of fixed expenses is feeling much more financial stress. For variable expenses, we want to try to keep them to about 20%, and right now they're at 19% in this example. These are your sinking fund expenses, so we want to target about 10%, but this can go up higher to 15%. I think if you're above 20, we're in dangerous territory. Third, there are two rules that you can apply to your budget to measure yourself against, which I include in the template. The first is the 80-20 rule, that says that you should pay yourself first by saving and investing 20% of your take-home pay, which includes pre-tax contributions made to your 401k, while the remaining 80% goes to cover expenses. The next rule is the 50-30-20 rule, which states that no more than 50% of your income should go toward needs, 30% to wants, and 20% toward saving and investing. In my template, I label each of the 47 budget lines as either a need or a want. Let's look at some other metrics. This is where I categorized everything by need or want. This amount is going to tie the $12,700 to total expenses. That's how you know the formula is working. In this case, we want to target 50% for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for saving. We're a little bit over when it comes to needs, under when it comes to want, and over when it comes to savings. If you follow these rules, you will almost always have money left over for savings and debt repayment. In our example, our couple is spending a smidge more on needs and a little less on wants. I see this as an opportunity to negotiate better rates on fixed expense needs like insurance, or throttling back spending on variable expense needs like furniture and housewares. But there's one more problem you might not have thought of: lifestyle creep. Granted, you have a little more than $3,000 left per a month in this example, which is a healthy amount when annualized. But believe me, if you don't have a plan for that money, it will find somewhere else to go. If you haven't already, you and your spouse need to start thinking about your goals and what you value. Let's say you value a private education for your 2 children. That could cost $3,000 per month. There you go, poof, I just spent all your money. But you can also start saving to buy that vacation home in Bilbao, Spain, where you eventually plan to retire. Or you could set up a soundproof music room in your basement so the family could jam out like the Hanson brothers. If you need help thinking through your goals and values, then look in the description box below for a link to my Wheel of Life assessment. This way, you can align your spending with what's most important to you. The example we went through in this video is what us product managers would call the happy path. But what if your budget is looking sad? In that case, you should check out this next video where we focus on increasing your take-home pay by adjusting your tax withholdings to get you one step closer to feeling like a financial boss. So check out that video, and I'll see you in the next one.